We'll get started. Good evening. Welcome to the June 9th Public School Committee meeting. We'll start with public input. Seeing no public input, we'll move on to reports. Do we have a student report?
Yes. So last week was the seniors' class activities, which included the boat cruise, the all-night party, class day. I heard that it was a good time. I didn't attend any of them, obviously, but they were all good, very fun. So the seniors also graduated on Sunday, which I think we were all at. So it was very hot, but it was a nice ceremony. Also recently at RMHS, elections for class office and student council happened, so results were posted for that. And as for the rest of the students at the high school, they're just eagerly waiting summer and sticking out the last few weeks. And finals are on their way, so studying for those.
When do finals start?
Next week.
Wednesday, next Thursday.
Great. Thank you. Are there reports from the committee? Ms. Doxer?
I attended my first Human Relations Advisory Council meeting, and there was a lot of discussion of the art contest and a lot of excitement about how many people had actually submitted work, which was wonderful. We had a long discussion about how to make the organization of the arts contest better for next year, so there are a lot of good ideas being shared, including how to make sure that someone is in charge of dropping off and picking up the artwork and making sure we keep an eye on it the whole time. Hopefully we're going to broach the topic of doing something with that contest in combination with the District Art Festival, so that would be a contest for artwork as well as music, to join the music that's there in the PAC Center. We also talked about next year's events, so we'll get off running in the fall, so we're talking about next year's street fair and the Martin Luther King Day celebration in March. We're looking forward to that, and another art contest, and next year participating in Family Day as well. We also had a visit from a local resident who lives at 30 Haven Street, where they had hate graffiti, and she brought that to the committee, and so we had a long discussion with her about different ways that we can help the residents there deal with that kind of a problem. And it's a town problem when someone in the town feels like they can draw SWAT stickers or send other messages, that what we're going to do about that. We're going to support the residents in figuring out what the protocol should be, and getting the police involved and what should happen in the future, as well as supporting them in the present. So it was a very full meeting, and I was very glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Borowski?
Thank you. The audit committee met last week. We reviewed the FY13 audit for the town side. It went phenomenally. We met all accounting standards. Our town auditors were thrilled with the fiscal position that the town finds itself in. I learned for the first time that our bond rating as a community has gone up to AAA. That's the gold standard. That's the highest you can get. That not only reflects the excellent fiscal management and sound procedures and controls we have in place, but it also is going to impact interest payments that we pay when we do capital projects going forward. So this could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. So it's a real honor for us, but also will have interest savings going forward. The management letter included 3 specific areas where we could take good processes and make them better. The town accountant and FinCom are already at work on them. One's already resolved, the other 2 are in process. In terms of the schools, we did talk about, after we went through the audit and signed off on it, we did talk about the fact that Mary Delay is leaving. We'll be hiring a new business manager, and the need for the town accountant to work to support that person coming up to speed, particularly when it comes to accounting and controls. And she's fully on board and looking forward to supporting that new person. So it was a very good meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Anything?
Just,
Mrs. Bev? Sure.
there were 2 things that Linda put at our stations around some STEM, and I know a few weeks ago we heard from the robotics team, And there is an event this Saturday at WPI called Touch Tomorrow, a festival of science, technology, and robots. And I know we got sort of a link through the district, and it's basically, it's for students. WPI, there's a lot of NASA presentations, so certainly a lot of the students who have been involved in the robotics and some of the engineering classes may have an interest in that. And just the other thing, the event is a early childhood STEM event, and it's not till November, and I just want to highlight this because, you know, we continue to have discussions about what are the needs for our district, our students, our families around early childhood education, preschool, and kindergarten. And I think, you know, this is something that is happening statewide, and it actually comes through the Donahue Foundation, which works with UMass, through UMass Lowell. So I think just in keeping in mind what the directions are statewide and nationally, we see, you know, these kinds of things really enriching that curriculum and the need to provide programming in those areas.
Excellent, thank you. Dr. Doherty, do you have a report this evening?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about graduation. I want to echo what Andrea said, is that it was a really fantastic event, and I want to thank our town DPW for making sure that the grounds were nice, because afterwards certainly there were pictures and opportunities and things like that. But I want to thank our facilities staff for doing a great job setting up the entire venue in preparation for it. Even to the details of making sure that we had fresh air coming in as early as 2 o'clock in the morning to try to keep it as cool as possible, even though it was going to be a hot day. I know that the PTO put water under each of the graduates' chairs so that they could have water during the event. The chorus did a great job. The band, both the jazz band and the concert band, did a great job. And then certainly the graduates, the speeches I thought were, fantastic from the three students that spoke. So overall, it was a very, very positive day. I also want to thank Guidance Director Linda Williams, who a lot of the behind-the-scenes coordination of the diplomas and the awards that are given at graduation are done by the Director of Guidance, and it was her first time doing it, because this is her first year as Director of Guidance. She did a great job. So overall, it was a very positive day.
I think we would all concur. I'd also say, Dr. Doherty, that was probably one of the best speeches that you've given in the years that you've had that honor. It was wonderful to listen to you. It was really well done. It was truly a nice day. On a different subject, but also on the same, I guess, Mr. Croft did an excellent job of handing out diplomas yesterday. It was sort of his last act as a member of this committee, and he will be sorely missed from these wonderful Monday nights. We do need to fill Mr. Croft's position, so I know that we have posted through the town applications for that position. 30 days, Dr. Doherty?
It's 30 days, and then there'll be a meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the school committee,
Right.
a joint meeting, in which there will be interviews of the people that have applied, and then a decision will be made in a joint vote.
Right, and so that seat is to finish, that seat will last until next April's.
Correct.
So at that point, there'll be three
Correct.
positions available.
Three openings. Yeah.
3 openings, yes.
Three openings available. So again, thank you to Mr. Croft, and we look forward to anybody who would like to be part of this group.
Mr. Caruso?
Yes,
I have one
Mrs. Webb.
other thing.
Sure.
Dr. Doherty also spoke at the baccalaureate service last week, which I believe was on Thursday evening, which that's a service that's put together by the Reading Clergy Association. So all of the clergy get together, and it's hosted at one of the churches, and that rotates every year.
Every year, yep.
So this year it was at the Unitarian Church. It's always followed by an ice cream social, and I believe the ice cream is donated by Dandelions, and it was delicious. But I want to say that Dr. Doherty gave a very inspiring speech, and it was completely different than what he talked about on graduation day. And I think it's for folks in Reading who have never attended the baccalaureate and who are members of their own church or religious community here in Reading, it's a wonderful service. It's open to every student. So just because, even if you're not a member of a church or religious group, it's open to everyone. It was wonderful. Thank
Great.
you.
Mr. Martins, I'm sorry, I skipped over you. Did you? Awesome. Even better. You already had your turn.
I had two votes.
Okay.
Ooh,
Just
all
a
right.
very
Mrs. Doxer?
Just very quickly, I finished my tour of the preschools and the kindergartens this week and had just a very fun time and an enlightening time seeing the teachers and the paraeducators at work. I visited Rise, Birch Meadow, and Barrows this time, and I saw a lot going on in very different sized classrooms and different sized classes. I saw a lot of very creative uses of space in order to do storage. Boxes with months on them put up high that have to be gotten down, closets with science kits, and every last ounce of space, inch of space, was used very creatively by teachers and by administration, which was very enlightening. And I saw the Discovery Children's Museum was doing a special program at one of the kindergartens, and that's connected to STEM and science learning and behavioral health and a very integrated approach. And I saw really wonderful developmental and age-appropriate learning going on. It's amazing how those kids, the kindergarten age and preschool age kids can start to run the classrooms. They know what comes next. They take over at circle time, and they're growing and learning with each thing they do through music and movement. And so thank you. I just wanted to say that I wish, and I'm going to be thinking about how to share that kind of learning about what goes on in the kindergarten and the preschools with the public, because I think if everybody saw it, it would be really enlightening as to what the core curriculum means when translated to preschool and kindergarten. I learned a lot, and I'd love to figure out a way to share that.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you very much. So that was a short-lived chair of a committee, because at this point, we're going to reorg. So at this time every year, the school committee reorgs. We choose a new chair and a new vice chair. So for that, I'm going to hand the gavel off to Dr. Doherty, and he'll run the meeting for a few minutes.
By one time a year. So in your packet is the policy BDA, which explains the process. Just briefly, so the majority of the school committee that's present will constitute the quorum. The election will proceed as follows. So nominations for the office of chairperson will be made from the floor, so I will ask for nominations. The chairperson will be elected by a majority roll call vote of the members present and voting. If no nominee receives a majority vote, the election will be declared null and void and nominations will be reopened, so we'll just keep doing it. At that point, once a chair has been elected, then I will hand the gavel back over to the chair, back to the new chair. And then he or she will run the election for vice chair. Okay? So at this time, I'd like to take nominations for chairperson. Mrs. Webb?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Chris Caruso for chairperson.
Second. Okay. Any other nominations?
Do we get discussion? Do we discuss it or no?
No.
Oh, can I just.
So yes, absolutely. Now, are there any, yes.
I just want to say that I'm really impressed. When I was last on the school committee, it was a while ago. Chris was relatively new at some point there, and I just want to say that I'm really impressed, and I think that Chris has a lot more experience. That makes you a vintage school committee member, and that really a lot of energy around the things that are ahead of us, and a desire to really work hard. And this committee takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. It's very easy to spend 20 or 30 hours a week, especially if you're visiting kindergarten classrooms and liaison. It's very intense time commitment to do well. So I'm really very happy and proud to be able to nominate and vote for Chris for our chair.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of Mr. Caruso as the chair? Opposed? None? No abstentions? 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I'll give it back to you.
Great. Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for those kind words, and I look forward to the coming year. As most of the committee knows, I'll have a senior at Reading High next year, so this is an extra special opportunity, so thank you very much. At this time, I'll take nominations for vice chair. Mrs. Dotson.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Robinson, if I could.
I would second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Discussion? Excellent.
No discussion.
No, you didn't wait.
Well, I did. Oh, did I look? I didn't even look.
Didn't look
I'm
to the
nervous at the no. I got no left. Mrs. Webb.
I think
I'm just
it's,
kidding.
no, I think this is outstanding opportunity, and even though it means that we're led by men, so once again, we have a vice chair and a chair. I feel like my life is the CEO and president. Someday, that will
Someday.
change, but right now, it's the best thing for this committee, and I think that it's going to be, again, Mr. Robinson has always put in an incredible amount of time, and I have, again, an enormous amount of respect for that, and especially because as a person who runs his own business, when business owners are not in place quite often, there's a bigger sacrifice than if you are an individual contributor in a bigger company and you might not be there. So I really appreciate that, and especially, actually, both Mr. Robinson and Mr. Caruso put an enormous amount of time into the contract negotiations this year. So,
Agree completely. The last time I was fortunate enough to be chair, Mr. Robinson was my right-hand man, and it was excellent. It was a wonderful year, so I look forward to the same. Okay, more discussion? Seeing none, ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion carries 5-0. All right, we have a few liaison appointments that we need to get through this evening. The first one that we'll discuss is the Audit Committee. Mr. Robinson's term is up on the Audit Committee. I know that he has expressed an interest in continuing that, and I thank him for that. So I would like to move to reappoint Mr. Robinson. Oh, yeah, I could do that. That would be
Is
even
Jean
better.
on it?
I'm sorry, Mrs.
Are you
Brodsky,
up?
you already, you
Yes,
were on the Audit
I
Committee, but
am.
your time is, you're not expired yet.
Yes,
Okay.
Oh, all right.
correct.
Certainly not expired. in
There
any-
were two
in any way.
people from the school committee on the audit
All
committee.
right, yeah.
Do we have a motion for the Audit Committee liaison?
I move to reappoint Chuck Robinson as school committee liaison to the audit committee.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Great. Discussion? Mrs. Brodsky?
I would like to say that Mr. Robinson's vast experience on the finance committee makes him very well suited to this appointment.
Agreed completely. Mrs. Doxer?
I would like to say that I have learned a lot watching Mr. Robinson in action, and it's been really helpful. I'm green when it comes to some of the financial workings of this committee, and it's been really helpful. Mr. Robinson is very articulate about what he's doing, why he's decided what he's decided, and how he's voting, and it's very helpful to me to understand. So I look forward to learning more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to say nice things about Mr. Robinson? No? We can go. Oh, great. The motion was seconded. All those in favor of the appointment? Opposed? And the motion carries 5-0. The next one is the representative for RCTV Board. I know that we've spoken to Mr. Carpenter, who has graciously accepted to be reappointed to that committee. So if we have a motion?
Move to appoint John Carpenter as school committee liaison to the RCTV Board of Directors.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Great.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Does this mean that when we give reports, Mr. Carpenter would be here to give a report on RCTV?
Absolutely, yes.
As well?
So Mr. Carpenter is welcome to come to any school committee meeting that he would like to and report on any of the goings-on of RCTV. And there are also times where we will ask Mr. Carpenter to come to a meeting and give us an update on all the great things that RCTV is doing. But he certainly won't come to every school committee meeting with a report.
He spoke, early winter,
I think so.
did a presentation.
Yeah.
And I know he very much enjoys and thanks us
Yep.
for the appointment.
Great, we have a second on the appointment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries 5-0. The last liaison appointment for, actually, there's two more things that we need to vote on, but the last liaison appointment is for the Recreation Committee. Mrs. Janowski is no longer on the school committee, and so we're going to need to find a replacement for her great work on the Rec Committee. I happen to know a certain someone sitting to my left that would be very interested in the position. Mrs. Borowski has agreed that that's something that she would be willing to do.
Very much.
So,
Mr. Chairman, move to appoint Ms. Jean Borowski to the school committee liaison position on the Recreation Committee.
is there a second? If I could quickly, Mrs. Borowski, you have had an amazing impact on the committee in your short time. We could not have asked for a better replacement at the time, and you've certainly become one of the greater members on this committee. So thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Thank you for those kind words.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the appointment? Opposed? The motion carries 5-0. The last order of business before we can get into the real meat of this evening is to talk about two representatives for the Early Childhood Education Space Needs Working Group. So I will entertain, is that what I'll do? Nominations for that committee. Mrs.
I'd like
Snodaker.
to nominate Mrs. Borowski, please.
Absolutely. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. I'm going to call on myself. I would like to nominate Mr. Robinson as the second member of that committee.
I would second that.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Can I,
Absolutely.
what's the schedule for the summer, this summer, do you know? yet?
We haven't set it up. We're still getting the members on board. The different boards are going to be selecting. And
So we-
then I'll be sending something out to the community in the previous working group.
So would you envision maybe, like we met in the afternoon?
Oh, sure, we can.
I
Yeah, it won't be
coach two
di- we'll-
baseball teams in
We'll
the
work
summer.
around people's schedules.
Okay.
Great. Would you like to make the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, move to appoint Jean Borowski and Chuck Robinson as school committee representatives to the Early Childhood Education Space Needs Working Group.
Second? Great. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion? And opposed? And the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, so the main focus of tonight's meeting are to conduct interviews for the Director of Finance and Operation interviews. We'll have 3 candidates this evening. Dr. Doherty, I would ask your help in kind of
Sure.
leading us.
Absolutely. So last Thursday, the Director of Finance and Operations Screening Committee met and interviewed several candidates for this position. It was an excellent process. We had 10 members of the screening committee present, and Mrs. Borowski represented the school committee. And so as a result of that, there are 3 finalists that have been moved forward. The first finalist will be Patricia Lugo. At 7:30, at 8 o'clock, Michelle Shepard, and at 8:30, Martha Siebert. Patricia Lugo is currently the Director of Finance and Operations for the East Bridgewater School District. So with your permission, Mr. Caruso, I can bring her in.
Absolutely,
I know
please.
that the school committee has questions prepared, and we can go from there.
I'll come up.
Okay. Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. Guys, we'll each take turns, and we'll go down the list, of questions that people have. No list, but you know what I mean.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Ms. Lugo, welcome to the school committee meeting tonight. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
Thank you for having
I'm
me.
Chris Caruso. I'm the chair of the committee.
Okay.
So we'll start this evening by allowing you an opening statement if you'd like to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll ask a series of questions.
Okay, sure.
Great.
My name is Patricia Lugo. I've been acting as a school business administrator and an accountant for school districts for 18 years. I started in my first district. I worked there for 12 years. I did everything from working on the budget, controlling the munis accounting system in all aspects, working with the grants, revolving funds, et cetera. And while I was working there, I had discovered that I wanted more than just an accounting position, and I wanted to become a school business administrator. So I went to school, and I became licensed by the Department of Ed. At that time, there were no openings in that current district for me to stay as a business administrator, so I had to look elsewhere. And so I went to the second district, and I worked there for 2 years. And the reason I had to leave that district was because of the commute. The commute was pretty lengthy, and my children were younger at the time, and so I was away from home quite a bit. So I went out looking again as a business manager's position, and ended up in the town of East Bridgewater. Again, I've been doing all aspects of the budget, from assisting with the creation of the budget, the reportings of the budget, all of the grants, all of the revolving funds, the student activities and such. So all of the money end of the budgets. I've also become certified as a mass public purchasing official. So I put out the bids, I do the bid openings, I award the bids, set up the contracts, et cetera. So in my current district, I've also been able to be on the building committee, which was...
That's not distracting at all.
No, it's not.
Sorry. Please continue.
That's okay. So anyway, I've been on the new school building project, and it was really a lot of fun. We put in the statements of interest to the Mass School Business Authority, and our project was approved overwhelmingly. So I was in right at the ground level from getting the building up and running, from all of the mountains of paperwork you have to send into the MSBA to the actual building being built. And it was just finished this past fall. And so we've been in it for this first year, and so I'm seeking a new position as a school business administrator.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to open it up to the committee for questions. Ms. Doxer, do you want to start?
Sure. What strikes me that you said mountains of paperwork was fun. That's great. Get ready.
Yes.
One of the things that happens in our district that's very important is the budget process, and parent volunteers are involved in that process.
Mm-hmm.
And the document that we go by is created by the person in your position.
Mm-hmm.
And the document, I don't know if you've seen it before. So it includes philosophy and theory and surveys from the staff to figure out what they think is important. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience creating such an important document and what you foresee being the challenges in
Okay, sure.
doing so.
Well, I've never had to work with such an extensive budget. When I looked it up on your website, I expected maybe 20 pages and saw the length of it. And I went through the report and saw how much information was included in that. And that's very important. It seems to incorporate a lot of things that a town report would also ask of, and that's where I've had to give most of my information to. So what you guys have, the Reading Public Schools has is one document. I've had as school budget documents and town reports. So it's been sort of broken up in two different areas. But again, they ask for all of the same information: the status of the accounts, the status of the budget. Where are we going in the future? Where we've been, history, where we're going in the future. So that's been my experience with such a budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you. Welcome. Our current director, assistant superintendent director of finance is a key member of the labor negotiations and, has developed a good rapport with the Reading Teachers Association and the Mass Teachers Association. And I'm curious that you didn't mention your experience in that area.
You're right, I did not, and I should have, because I've always been a part of the negotiations, not so much in coming up with ideas, but rather doing cost analyses on the negotiations. If we do this, if we do that, where can we stretch things out a little bit? So we've had to come up with quite a few creative ideas, as such, and especially in these hard times. But I've been on all of the negotiations and enjoy that as well. Have a great rapport with the EBEA president, staff members. I get along very well with people, so I find that you get more out of people when they like you, when you like them, and you have a connection with each other. So I wouldn't have any problems.
Thanks, that's a good follow.
Of course, Ken.
So, I look at this position as a very public position.
Yes.
It's not a position that's, buried in spreadsheets or, that's part of the job, but big part of the job is, as kind of what you intimated, that's a document that put together that answers everybody's questions so that we've been able to have the rapport with the community that they respect and listen to because the answers are in that document, not just the 20-page income statement balance sheet. So what's your experience with that, collaborating with the town meeting and that sort of thing?
Well, I've always had to be a part of the school committee meetings. I have had to give biweekly presentations at all of the school committee meetings. I've been to all of the town meetings where I've had to get up and answer questions, give information. I interact with all of the municipal department heads and such, so that we know, we're all on the same page, we know what we're doing. In terms of getting them information for the annual town meeting and such, I've always had to prepare that. So, I don't have a problem being that person. And unfortunately, in a lot of districts, you're not given enough credit to do that. Usually the superintendent likes to stand in and do those sorts of things. So that's great that you have someone who can take that burden off of the superintendent's shoulders.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Borowski?
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask about your performance expectations of the administrators who will be reporting to you should you get this position. So you're going to have a nutrition department and the facilities department. How will you manage, what's your leadership style, your management style?
Sure. Well, I'm very hands-on myself, and I have an open door policy. So if there's any problems, I want to know right away. And I like to bring people up to their full potential. So if I see that someone needs a little help in an area or we need to figure out a solution to something, I like to go right in with that person and put our heads together and let's figure something out. I have managed the food services programs in other districts and the transportation department, the facilities department, the IT department, and again, some of those names of the people that I worked with were on my reference list. So I think anyone that you talk to would say I'd come right in and join with them, solve the problem, or make something better if we can. And I work very closely with the department heads and the staff that I have to deal with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mrs. Webb?
Yeah, I guess I have a question about the transparency. One of the issues that we have in Reading, I think, is trying to make sure that we are really transparent and we share as much information, and that's why we have budget parents. And I think we've had that process for over 10 years now, where we have budget parents from each school participating in that process. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, your experience. And I think that there's sort of it seems sometimes a downside to transparency too. And I don't know whether that's something you've experienced. I think we sometimes experience, it doesn't deter us from, from being transparent and continuing to try to be transparent. Maybe you could comment.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'm very transparent too. I think the more that everyone sees and has in their hand and can look at, the more they'll understand things and the less questions that will end up coming my way. So it works better when everything is laid out to the public as much as possible. And I laugh at your budget report. I think it was 168 pages, and I thought, holy moly, but I've seen a few other districts who have gone to that length to get, as you said, to get all of the information out there. So I think that's wonderful that you do that. I think that's a great idea that you do that. The more people know, the more they'll understand, the more they'll trust you. The more they'll respect your opinions or anything that you may, excuse me, or anything that you may be presenting to the public as a new idea or such. So I think transparency is very important, and you would hope that a lot of people read the information. It can be overwhelming. You laughed that I had piles of paperwork for the MSBA, but I'd love to read. So to me, that's something fun to do. So you would hope that, since you put so much effort into that budget report, in your report, that a lot of people read that and get information out of it. I don't know what questions parents may have, or if they come back and still worry about things. The less you give them, the more they're going to come back asking questions. And if they don't trust you, you might as well not be there, actually, if you know what I'm saying, if they can't trust you. So I feel like it's very important that the transparency be there.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Of course you can.
So I think it was in the letter, you talk about, really wanting a challenge. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, what are the things you think you're bringing that are like, I am so lined up for this job. Like, this is why I'm perfect for this job.
Right.
And what are the things that are, this is going to be my challenge area, but I have this toolkit, these skill set that is going to help me with that. So maybe you could comment.
Sure. Well, if I may ask a question before that, does the Reading Public Schools use the Munis accounting system?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a big plus right there. I've used the Munis accounting system for over 12 years and was an expert at that. In my current district, we're not using that software, which is unfortunate for us. But so I am very familiar with the accounting system, how it works, how to get the reports out of it. I've done a lot of training over the years for staff members to teach them how to get the reports to come out right, to know. You have to figure out what you want to get as a result and try to figure out which of the reports and things that information comes from. So I have a very strong skill set in your Munis accounting system. Secondly, I think in my little toolkit of what I can bring, I'm a very organized person. And I noticed that in the job responsibilities that were posted, there seemed to be a trend towards creating manuals, documenting things, procedures, and things like that throughout the business office. And I have great organizational skills, and that was going to be my next project in my current district, was to make a manual of the whole business office. So that would be a great challenge for me. I would love to do that. So I think the few items that you had listed in your responsibilities were things that I could tackle pretty easily.
Mr. Robinson?
Yep. Can you talk about something that didn't work out for you and how you handled it or dealt with it?
Okay, something that didn't work out. Well, I could tell you something that happened that was a rough area, but it happened to turn out okay in the end. I can't think of anything that
That's
didn't
fine.
really turn out, but in one district, we had special ed transportation in-house, and the vans that we used were very old, needed repairs. The staff members that we had, the driving staff members that we had, had become unionized, so their hourly rates were very high. There were a few that seemed to take all of the overtime without sharing it with others. So there was a lot of bickering within the drivers themselves. So I had looked to a local collaborative who did special ed transportation and discussed the situation with them and asked them for a quote to do our special ed transportation. And it turns out that that we were able to save about $220,000 a year by outsourcing the special ed transportation. And the problems were, one, that we had to now let all of the employees go. So that was one problem that we discovered, although the collaborative did hire a number of drivers from our district into their district. So some of the drivers had their same children that they were previously driving. So that made the parents very happy, because one of the other problems was that the parents were very nervous about now having new drivers for their children. However, once they saw the brand-new vans, and they were air-conditioned vans, and some of the students would have the same drivers, the parents were very happy with the results as well. So there were a few glitches in changing this from in-house to outsourcing, but in the end, it was a win-win situation for everybody.
Thank you.
Mrs. Doxer?
Sure. Education is really intrinsic to both the finances and the budgeting in this district. It might be separated in other places, but here it's really enmeshed. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your background in education. I know that you've become certified in education administration. Can you talk a little bit about your understanding of education in terms of what happens in the classroom, professional development, and the connection between that and how you see what your work will be?
Okay, sure. I have a certificate in educational leadership. And when I started working in my first district, it was quite a change for me, because I had worked in private business for years before that. So to change from a private business to now go into municipal accounting was a complete 180. And I loved being in the educational area. I loved that we were proud of our students, that the focus was getting the great MCAS scores. Now I know they're switching to the PARCC system. So it was, and I worked through the 90s and the 2000s, so it was MCAS was the driving force, and there was so much emphasis put on that. There was emphasis put on the teachers for professional development, because they hadn't had the MCAS system before. I think the more that teachers are educated and the more they grow, the more they can help their students. I think that goes without saying. I was also a teacher part-time in one of the school districts, my first school district, and I was the accounting teacher for a high school adult diploma program, and I did that for 4 years. So here I was, being the finance person in a district. Now I'm going to teaching. And it really gave me a great respect for teachers, because it is very hard work. And I loved it. And some teachers are great and are natural at it. Some have a more difficult time, and they've got to try a little bit harder. I think if we can find the best teachers, give them the best professional development, give them the best salaries that we can afford to, it ultimately will result into, I think, better learning in the school environment because the teachers are that much more engaged. You're welcome.
Mrs. Butt?
So I have just a couple questions about facilities management.
Mhm.
So could you maybe go into a little bit more detail about facilities management? Because
Mhm.
that's certainly a big piece of this role.
Okay. In the first district that I was in charge of the facilities department, and we had one facility manager, and he looked after the 3 schools. The second year that I was there, the town took over his department, and they became part of the town. But he did a great job managing the 3 schools. The town had money to give to the facilities department, so staffing was okay, and the monetary funds from the town were pretty good. So we didn't really have too many issues in my first district. In the second district, finances are a big problem, and the buildings that we have 3 buildings, and they were all 50 to 60 years old. 2 of the buildings today still have the original furnaces that were put into the system that they can't even find parts for any longer. The 3rd building is the new high school we built, so that took care of that school. However, when I first started, they were using oil heat in all of the buildings, and they were dual burning furnaces. So I had them switch over from oil heat to gas heat. So the buildings needed maybe $10,000 worth of changing components and such to get the furnaces to burn gas. But we saved probably $70,000 a year by doing that. Now, this year, we put in a capital projects, to the capital projects committee, funding to replace the 2 furnaces in the other 2 buildings. We've had great maintenance crews, outside maintenance crews. I've had 3 wonderful head custodians that took care of each of the 3 buildings. The problem that we've had is the lack of staffing and not enough funding to get some of the things done that we've needed to, because the district has very tight financial constraints to work with. So those have been some of the challenges that we've had.
Thank you.
So, if I might, so in Reading,
Mhm.
the school department has the unique position of being in charge of all town facilities, which probably is different than other districts that you've worked in. How do you see that as a challenge?
Well, this past year, what I didn't mention was this past year, in my first district, in the second year, the town took over the facilities department. This past year, in my current district, the town also took over the facilities and put it under the DPW department. So I've had to train the new town facilities manager as to what the processes were in our district for recognizing problems in the buildings, trying to work with the staff that we had, putting together the capital projects plans, and such. And I have explained to him how to use the correct documents and things like that. And another thing that I found was very helpful was that whenever we presented capital projects to the capital planning committee, they sat behind their desks and we presented them with pieces of paper. This is what we need and this is how much it will cost. And by the end of the night, after every department goes through them, they're all glassy-eyed. So what I found was, in being in the school department, was we had a lot of needs in the cafeterias because they were so old. Original kitchen equipment, inefficient, gas connections aren't good any longer. So what I started to do is to take pictures of the problems. The hot sinks that were rusting underneath, that were ready to fall through. We had one water leak in a corner of a building that hadn't been discovered, and it was just like a hose constantly turned on, and nobody knew that it was there for years. So I took pictures of the things that were safety hazards and things that really needed to be taken care of right away, and started to present the Capitals Committee with the pictures of rusted bathroom stalls, for instance, the windows that you could see right through the outside. And that really was more of an impact to them. So when the new facilities manager came on board, I said, this is what you have to do. You have to take your camera and you have to show them. They're not going to come to your school to look at the problem. We have to bring the problems to them. So that was one way I think that we started to capture their attention and looking into our needs a lot more seriously.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had I have a question, but I had a follow-up to that question. Why did you mentioned that the two towns that were moving it or moving it from the facilities from the school to the town, why was that decision made?
I think to save money, for a few different reasons. Both were very small districts, and I think they thought if they can incorporate the facilities into one unit under the DPW, that now staff can be shared. For instance, we did not have a staff person to take care of the libraries in town, and so they went unattended for years. But by mixing the DPW staff and the school staff, now they had more people to share. They had more staffing resources that they could share in terms of the maintenance of the outside of the buildings and staffing for these buildings that hadn't had any staffing in them. I think in a lot of towns have been looking, there's been some initiative from the Department of Ed to have towns and school departments try to take their resources and share them between the two. For instance, facilities was one area where the Department of Ed had suggested. The IT department was another area that they had suggested. And so I think a lot of towns and schools are starting to look at sharing those resources.
Okay. I guess.
Absolutely.
So my other question, I'm just trying to get a sense, I'm not trying to trip you up, or I'm just trying to get it. So the way you mentioned you worked in the private sector, and the way I view this office is, that's the CEO.
Mhm.
This position is the CFO.
Exactly.
It's not just an accounting officer, it's much more than that. And,
Exactly.
Our goal and your predecessor has taken a lot of things off of the superintendent's plate that in past people in that past position, or we may not even had that position for a while. That was a lot more on the superintendent's plate. It isn't anymore. It's still the superintendent's budget when it comes to us, but, he's not down at the ground level putting it together, and I don't want that to happen, or I don't think we want that to happen.
Right.
So how would you go about putting together, being the leader of the budget, not just doing what the superintendent asked you to put down, but actually developing it yourself?
Sure.
I don't know if it didn't come out.
No, I
think
understand
know.
completely. Mary may have little feet, but she's leaving behind big shoes to fill. And I recognize that. I know that Mary's been a big part of the district because I've been involved with MASBO. And Mary's always coming up with something, doing something, leading this group or this charge for something. So when I saw the budget, I was not surprised that Mary would put something like that together. And she has started a great trend, and you don't want to go backwards. I think when you're replacing a school business administrator, or probably most of your admin team, everyone gets to a certain point, and then if they should happen to leave, I know Mary's got a great opportunity ahead of her. If they should happen to leave, you don't want to start all over from the beginning or from scratch. You don't want to recreate that wheel. You want someone who can come in and pick up right where Mary left off and continue that trend. And I always say my budget is my baby. That's my main focus. I think that if you've talked to any of my references, you'll see that that's exactly what I do. As I lead the budget, I know where the budget's going. I know if there's a problem arising, I can address it. I can recognize it early on. The budgets have been, the budgets for the appropriated budget, the grants, the revolving funds, all of that. I do monthly reports on them, and I meet with the department heads of whichever grants or revolving accounts they may have, and make sure I know where they're going so that we're all looking forward in the same direction and going in the same direction. And it's not my place to just sit back and, like you said, be led by questions or things. It's my job as well to present new ideas and new things to the superintendent and the school committee. I have a very strong background in that budget, and I would not let where you are now be brought backwards. I would take it and go forward and run forward with it, although they're big shoes to fill.
Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
Mrs. Webb.
So I have one question, just because you've talked about it a little bit before. So is the commute going to be something that works for you or something that fails 2 years down the road?
Well, actually, I have family in Malden that I intend to stay with at the beginning. I used to live in the North Shore, so I'm familiar with the area. I'm from Connecticut originally, so I don't have any ties to my current residence. It's either going to go up for sale soon or it's going to be rented soon. I am just as willing to move to this area. And as a matter of fact, when I came up today, I saw that there was a train station just down the street, and I love to hop on the train and go into Boston. So my children are grown. They don't live at home with me. It's myself and my dog. And I have no ties to the community that I'm in any longer, and I'm looking for the best fit for myself as well in terms of a job. So if it's the right fit, that's where my heart will be dedicated to.
Thank you. I know that was a little bit personal question, but
No, that's
I thought
okay.
you opened the door in here.
No, that's okay.
Thank you.
Are there any
welcome.
further questions from the committee? No? Do you have anything you'd like to leave us with, or any closing remarks?
Sure. Well, I'm very interested in the Reading Public Schools. Seems like you have a nice little community here, and Mary's done a lot of hard work to get your financial area as transparent as it is, and I would love to follow in Mary's footsteps and not let her work falter in any manner, and I think I can do that for you.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I don't know. I feel like I should hop the desk and shake hands. But
Thank you I'll come over to you.
thank you very much for that.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for your time.
A pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
Of course you can. 1.2 million? Why does that ring a bell? Yeah. Yes. My numbers are probably wrong, so. I know, I try to do that, but then sometimes I back off, like, well, you know.
I would have quoted you.
I'm just kidding.
Clearly has, she has experience with the facilities.
Mr. Crusoe,
Yes,
a
Mrs.
question?
Of course you can. Is
Um,
it appropriate for the?
Well, I'm just wondering about the protocol now.
Sure.
Do we have time in between and we discuss candidates, and is that, or do we?
Unfortunately, we hadn't set that up, so what we would like to do is have the 3 interviews, because the next one should be starting at 8. Is our candidate ready, Dr. Doherty? or- Awesome. So, I'm sorry, Mr. Robinson was getting a quick drink. So we really don't have time to talk in between. So we can talk after?
That's
Okay.
fine. I just didn't know.
The expectation is that we'll
like,
talk after.
Okay, I
Is that
didn't
good?
know if we leave here and then Thursday we do the discussion before the vote, or whether we do that
The
tonight.
expectation is that after the 3 candidates are interviewed this evening, we'll continue our discussion.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Is that in line with what you were thinking, Dr. Doherty? Great. Really?
Mhm.
Well, that could be good. It's extremely intimidating. This is me. That was excellent.
So I'd like to introduce to you Michelle Shepard. Michelle currently is the Assistant Treasurer and Collector for the city of Fitchburg. As you can see from her resume, also she has been involved with the MASBO program, Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials.
Ms. Shepherd, welcome. Thank you for coming to our meeting tonight. If you would like to start with any opening statement, and then we can get into the questions.
My name is Michelle Shepard. For last 6.5 years, I've worked for the city of Fitchburg as the assistant treasurer collector. That job entailed quite a bit. When I first started in 2007, the city was near receivership, or bankruptcy, basically. As part of the finance team, we reorganized the city. We're talking like stabilization fund was $10,000 and had a BBB minus rating for bond. In 2009, there was a $5 million budget shortfall. Through changes in reorganizing the departments, working to bring in revenues that just sat there in tax title accounts, working with the PEC and the other municipal departments to bring about changes in the health insurance, where we actually eliminated the old Blue Cross Blue Shield Master Medical because it was costing the city an arm and a leg, literally. Recently, we've removed Fallon with the negotiations of the unions and their agreements through the PEC. And we've been able to make substantial savings up in the millions through changes in the tiers in the insurance, along with the deductibles. And all that's been with the consent and the savings, because it comes in both sides, the 25-75 split on the insurances, the health insurance. So it saves the employees money also, and they realize that. It was a matter of education, and we finally made it through. So we've had reasonable increases. I know some have had like 15% increases where we've had like 8. They're also reorganized we actually invited in DOR for the audit. We knew we were in danger. We invited them in, had them do an audit, had them do recommendations of procedures and items that they thought would be useful to us and that we needed to implement. Myself being a CPA, having that strong background in auditing and accounting, I implemented procedures to safeguard the assets. The prior treasurer, or actually a couple treasurers ago, money went missing, and then he had a untimely death, and the city had that very bad outlook with the public and the lack of trust, and that needed to be reestablished. So we worked to do that, and we've come around to a $5 million stabilization fund. Our bond rating has gone to A+. We refinanced our debt to a lower rate, which is usually not done that often with cities or towns. So we're in pretty good shape. Our only problem being an old mill town, and we've looked for answers, and we haven't really come up with any, is the economic development, and we need a growth factor, because the ceiling's getting too close to the levy. We don't have those tax revenues. We're gonna max out our 2.5% and have no monies to be able to afford the budget within a few years. So that is like a lot of the different towns. We're still looking for answers for that. But to get us from where we were, almost as bad as Springfield and some of the other cities and towns, to be where we are today, we've made great strides. And I take credit with working with that finance team to get there. Why I consider this position today is I'm looking for a challenging career in finance. I've had 20-plus years owning my own CPA firm. I worked 10 years prior to that for a firm in Worcester while I got my certification. And on the side, I also have a lot of community development that I like to do and keep my hands in with helping. I need a purpose and a mission to the job that I do. I found that you can work with finances, and that's very easy, but there's really no real purpose to it. I believe that working with a school system and having the children as an ultimate purpose, and using the resources we have to provide them with the most valuable education and tools to make that education important. And I would like to be part of that.
Thank you very much.
Start off with questions.
Okay,
Mrs. Doxer?
thank you. My first question is about the budget document. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it online.
168 pages in my earlier interview. I was very impressed. That's twisted every which way but loose. But it's nice in that you come out with the numbers and you say what it is, and then you describe it in different, you take it apart and you describe it. So the parents in the community, and along with other people who actually understand the finances, can look at that and see what you're talking about and understand why certain factors come about, why you have all those unfunded items, because you couldn't fit it into the budget. But with a long-range plan, you'll start to bring them in. So I thought that it was very, very meticulous. And I've only seen a few others that were actually that many pages and in that detail. It's
So-
impressive.
That would be you creating that budget in conjunction with the teachers and,
I understand you have like a finance team that you worked with that include a little of everybody, that you kind of put all the input in, and then we develop a budget. Because numbers is one thing, and then working the whys and the hows.
so it entails some knowledge of education. Can you talk a little to where your knowledge of education comes in and how that would inform your working on this budget document? Thank you.
Going through the MASBO course, I learned a lot of where the monies come from and the expenditures, and my internship in Clinton Public Schools. We're working with their SPED and their grants. Also, working in the municipality side of it, I see the funds coming in because I'm responsible, along with the bookkeeper, for the cash and the transfers, and seeing that those transfers come in on a timely basis when they're supposed to. I see the warrants come through each week, having to fund those warrants. The school being every other week, but then there's the other week that is actually the municipality, so we kind of every other week for each different one. So I've gotten that side of it. From the grant standpoint, with my CPA experience in the past, I've actually audited some schools. So I've come in, reviewed the grants, and reviewed the different parts of the revenues to make sure that they were properly accounted for, the grants were spent on what they were supposed to be spent on. If there wasn't, you didn't spend it all, is it carried over? If you overspent it, why? Is it something we've allocated there that should be somewhere else? I also attended the circuit breaker workshop so that I would have a better understanding of how that form flows and the information that was needed to be implemented, input into it, so that you can get your monies, and if you needed to go for any extra, should you exceed your normal cost in any one year. So I've got a pretty good inkling of how the flow of the monies goes and from the educational side.
Thank you.
Was there more than the monies that you wanted a little more interpretation on, or?
Well, I guess that when I see the job, that it almost feels superhuman, the job in some ways. And because it entails the understanding of that money and the flow of that money, but also the understanding of what it's being spent on and why, and having to prioritize, like you pointed out about the, oh, by the way, I'm Linda, the budget. The document talks about the different levels and what it's being spent for and what we'd like it to spend for, but what we can't now. And so I was interested in hearing about the piece, understanding what is being offered, what those dollars are buying, and how, what you know in terms of prioritizing that and working with the teachers to work on that. Did that make sense?
Well, the majority of the budget is always in the benefits. You've got the salary and you've got the fringe benefits. That's everybody's budget, municipal or school. Then you have your expenditures for your supplies, your professional development. And I think it's important for that to be able to fund that professional development, because the teachers need to learn as well as the students. And with all the government changes in what we're supposed to be teaching and how we're supposed to be teaching it, there's no way that they can know without going to these courses and the seminars, so that they can learn. You know, even if it isn't everyone that goes there, if some people from a department go and they come back, they can train the others. And as for supplies and some of the other items, you look towards grants. You know, if it may even be an equipment type item, but usually it's smaller items that you need for the classroom. And sometimes the PTOs, sometimes other community organizations such as the Exchange Club, the Lions, you know, asking them, sometimes they'll do it from the scholarship side for the students, sometimes they do it as putting forward some money or buying an item that the classroom needs. You know, it's not always the big grants and stuff like that, I mean, it does, but I mean, there's other smaller avenues that if you're short that little bit in the budget, those particular items you can't fund that year, that may be an avenue we'll go about and come up with some monies for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you. Welcome. Talk about how, I mean, some of the things you described, sound like triage, dealing with the bond rating.
Pretty much. It kind of really opened my eyes of all the years in business, that's for sure.
Things aren't broken here, and, you know, we're not looking for somebody to come in and make a lot of changes, but to continue the good direction that it's going in. How do you deal with people? To talk about how you work with people and collaborate with them, and as I mentioned when you were sitting back there, that, you know, this is I look at it as a very public position. It's become that because of your predecessor, and, you know, how will you continue that?
Well, you need to have that contact with the community. I realize in the earlier interviews, you did have a parent in, you did have someone from the community, and you need to have those ties, which I think is important. I mean, in my past, I've been part of Fitchburg Historical Society, and what we've done is build a library to educate the public on history. But also what we've done is gone to the schools and had classrooms. We made up trunks that they could come in and use to teach the students about the Civil War. in doing that, they were able to hands-on touch. They could see the clothes, they could see the type of items that they used. We did an archaeological dig. There's a lot of things that where we reached out to the school to teach the kids. Nowadays, you know, a lot of the learning is in a book and they don't see, you know, or it's video games and stuff that they're doing now, and they can't relate to something that happened back then. You can read it in a book, but if you can physically see it, it's another method of learning that they can grasp. I think that's really important. In this position, it does make it easier that it is all cleaned up, and we don't have to get to that point, which is great, because then it starts with a starting point to go forward to see what else we can provide. I know you had looked into doing a full-time kindergarten to expand your program of what you have, and trying to figure out whether do you charge tuition or do you work it from the Chapter 70? Well, we have funds to extend out that year before you can cycle it into the Chapter 70. You know, do you want to go that route? It's an analysis. I'm very good at analysis. Looking at the picture, you know, and coming up with the results and being able to discuss it with people. In my past, I attended council meetings. I've attended, I've been on several boards throughout the city, the Exchange Club, Lions, Rotary, in past years. I mean, lately it's just been Fitchburg Historical, which has been like 12 years. And in that time, we actually underwent a construction project. We bought a 5-story building, actually with 2 other attached buildings, and eventually sold those off. But we completed 4 out of 5 with a capital campaign of 3.5. We weren't able to complete that. Actually, with the basement, it'd be that 4th floor that we really wanted to complete. They are looking to go forward eventually and do that. But, I mean, that was a lot of documentation, like you said, putting out the RFPs, looking through the construction. I was actually on the construction committee. We built an outside elevator to accommodate the handicap. The building basically had to be all reinforced. It was an old 1800s building. So in order to meet the standard, the new building code, it basically has to withstand an earthquake. So that there is steel reinforcing the wooden structure. So, I mean, I physically got a hands-on look of going through, you know, meeting with the architect, meeting with the construction companies, some of the, you know, even their subs, and reviewing what they were doing. So, I mean, that was very enlightening. I mean, in my past, in my CPA firm, I've had construction clients. So I've kind of got a handle on what they need to do and the timing, and, you know, seeing it from that standpoint. But I think going forward, it can still be a challenge, and I can look to other avenues to find resources to add those items that you didn't fit in, because a lot of it's technology. And I think you may be able to squeak some out of some of the grants. I've read some articles where they've said, like, the Title II could cover some of it, and there was like 4 different grants that they had suggested that you might be able to use for different pieces of your technology. One in training your teachers so that they better understood the technology, part getting the technology for the students, and then working on an overall update network of the system. Because every so many years, your technology gets obsolete, and you need to go forward with that. So, I mean, sometimes some of the big foundations will come up with money, too. It's just a matter of asking them and putting together somewhat like a grant proposal for them to receive money. In Fitchburg Historical, we put a proposal together to build our library, and the Mellon Foundation came forward with $5 million. So, I mean, there are other avenues of having money. So, but I think she's done a fantastic job. It's going to be like big shoes to fill, and to come in and to continue that involvement that she had. But I'm used to working a lot of hours. That doesn't really bother me. I mean, I come from CPA firm and working in years 80 hours a week. So, I mean, I'm currently working 37 and a half, and that's why I have community involvement, because I still have time on my hands. So coming forward here, I have the energy, I have the hours, and I can put in the effort that needs to be made to do this. And I think it's important to continue with the Masbo connection too, because there's a lot of ideas that get brought forward each month in their meetings, and they have very good speakers. They have the state, Jay Sullivan's on all the time, and some of his staff answering different questions, how to do the reports, the changes that come through. I've dealt a lot with payroll and some of the personnel and the fringe benefits side from my position with the city, and dealing with state and federal government and compliance. I deal with the unemployment. I deal with the workman's comp insurance. I've put together the OPEB numbers, working with the auditor so that he could submit it to the actuary. So I've got a lot of financial, different procedures and stuff that I've done in the past besides the budget.
I just ask a follow-up.
Of course you can.
So, just because of something you mentioned, the Mellon or Carnegie, I think you said. So, one of our treasured and important partners is recently, within the last 5 years, I think, or less than that, maybe formed the Reading Education Foundation. And this position holds an ex officio position. What's your experience in working on the foundation or with a foundation?
Well, I've worked a little bit with the North Central Foundation in terms of the Central Mass Chamber of Commerce with some investments and donor funds, where sometimes in lieu of soliciting people directly, a fund can be established on your benefit in, like, the community foundation. I've worked with, from the accounting and tax side of it, reporting for the different organizations that I've been in, the nonprofits, and having to file all the 990s and the PCs and the other reports and tax returns. Some I've prepared myself, some we've had outside auditors prepare, in which I gave them the information, reviewed it, and signed it, and sent it. So I do have some familiarity with foundations and other nonprofit groups.
Thank you.
Ms. Porowski?
Good to see you again. I have a question about how you will manage staff. There are several administrators and departments that report into this position. So what kind of a manager are you, and how do you manage those relationships?
Well, we all have our jobs to do, and I don't like to micromanage them. When we have tasks at hand, I like to bring it, we have that report, because I'm assuming, like, your finance director has been in place a while, and some of your other, directors. So they know what they basically need to do. It's just a matter of maybe reminding them at certain points that, here's the budget process, okay, I'm gonna need this by this date, and just being available, an open door. If we need to, have a discussion over something, there may be questions that I have. I mean, initially coming in, what I would probably like to do is go around, meet the department heads, talk to them. See what they have in mind, see what's coming up in the next year. Do they have concerns? Are the things that we can try to work out? What things would they like to see happen? And by getting that as a starting point, then I have a better understanding going forward. I've worked with several different, my current position, basically, I'm in charge of the payroll staff, I'm in charge of the parking, the garages, the meters that they have to do. We have parking hearings, the garages themselves for facility standpoint. I work with the treasurer with that and purchasing. They've been in disrepair for a long time, and they need a lot of work, and we've been putting together and getting bids to submit to get the work done. We recently had to pretty much overhaul the elevator in order to get it inspected. We've just completed that and got it inspected. Also in charge of the IT is under our department. But in coordination with that, I did a project where others weren't available, and I had the time, and I was willing to do the extra time to work with the school, with Bob Jokla, and try to implement from 9.4 to 10.4 to get a paperless office, so that the payroll will be all on a website, and they can log in, and they can get their W-2s, their weekly pay stubs. We can track accruals through there. And what they did is, they wanted to set it up so that the school would go first, and then the municipality would follow. We haven't quite got there. We have pretty much everything almost in place, and what it was, there was like 7,000 errors from the initial setup from the munis, which they've had since 2000. And everybody kind of kept doing the same thing, and you can't have multiple bases the way that they had implemented between the main one and then each individual employee. So we've had to correct those, and now that we get those corrected, we should go online before the end of the year. Is what we're really gearing up towards, and then the municipality will hop in on the bandwagon. It's kind of taken a long time in a lot of departments, so we're trying to work with the school. And that's been a whole phase we're trying to get past with a lot of individuals, because when I first came in, the school and the city did not really talk. It was like, they're over there, we're over here, we don't want anything to do with them. So we've tried to work more, because, I mean, they've needed financing, they need to come through the treasurer's office to get it. There was different, like this project that we needed to get going. Payroll, basically, they data enter their time for each of their schools, and then it comes through our office to complete the payroll, print the checks, and then get those back over to the school. We're also responsible for printing the retirement checks. So there's a lot of, and there's only 2 people plus myself in that office. So every other week's a payroll, plus you have other payrolls, because you've got your paras, and you've got your 18 weeks, your 20 weeks, you got your 24 weeks, and for the sake of benefits and pays themselves, we've got 3 different things going on. Plus you have the Quinn bill coming from the police, which is 4 times a year, separate payroll there. So I work with a lot of different departments. In the past, when people were out, we had the purchasing. I helped to cover some of the purchasing over there, with the picking of the snowplow drivers and going through some of it. Do they owe the taxes? Do we have their insurance? Is there things that we need? From the auditor's standpoint, he didn't have an assistant for a long period of time. He had a clerical, but not really an assistant. They had eliminated that position prior to myself coming in 2007. He needed help over there. In times that he was out, I had to go over there and run the warrant. So I would take the school's information, check that, run the warrant, take the city side, their information, check that, and run the warrant. And one of the girls from the treasurer's office physically ran the checks, and then we distribute them. So, I mean, I've worked with a lot of different departments, and hopefully, in an easy-going manner. Work with water and sewer. Our enterprise is separate, and Missy does all the billings there. We actually moved from quarterly to monthly billing, which some people would be insane. We still have that debate going, because it's like 13,000 bills. We do it in 6 pieces so that it kind of cycles before when she did it, but now it's like every single month. So it's a huge amount of paperwork that needs to be done there. We do use lock boxes to collect some of the money so that everything isn't running through the treasurer's office. And each department has their own departmental receipts that they take and they turn over to the treasurer's office, so we see that coming through. A lot of times those don't reconcile, and we'll help the audit department with the individual departments, like the clerks. They won't be able to tie out certain items, say dog licenses. It doesn't tie out. Dick's, the auditor, says it's this, I got this, why am I off? So we go in, do an analysis with them, show them why they're off, and then they can resubmit, or their report's okay and just something needs to be reclassified in the general ledger. So we do have Munis. I've worked with that for 6.5 years. Like I said, I've worked with the warrant function, I've worked with the payroll function, and the treasurer, which would be the receipts and our own internal bills for our department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Webb?
Actually, I don't think I have any additional questions, but I appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any follow-ups from the committee?
I'm good.
Excellent. Would you like
Thank
to, any closing words, any closing remarks?
Yes. I would really think that this would be a nice challenge and a real fit in my life right now. Like I said, I'm looking for something with a little more challenge to it. Reading is a good location for me. I'm in the process of actually selling my house in Fitchburg. I got married 4 years ago, so we've had a few too many houses, but the market really wasn't a sale market. So I'm currently looking to put my house up on the market, and I'll be moving to Tingsboro. So this will be a close area.
Great.
And I think Reading has that nice, small town. I mean, Fitchburg's budget is over 100,000. The school itself is 57, million. 57 million is the school, the remainder being the city. So, I mean, and it's a larger budget there than it is here. So in terms of dollars and budgeting, it really, it's either just bigger dollars or smaller dollars, but basically you have that same flow. But I like that smallerness. I like that the community input into your schools. Your schools look very appealing when you come. I was amazed, kind of drove around, and tonight kind of drove around town a little bit there to kind of see things, because when I came in the first time, it was just right to here and really didn't see much. So I drove around town a little bit. I did see the train like the earlier one mentioned. And it is a nice little area, and I would, really enjoy working and being part of your finance team.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to recess for a minute? We certainly can. We'll take a quick break, guys, before we start. Great. The third candidate this evening?
Yes, I would love to. So the third candidate is Martha Seibert. Martha is currently the school business assistant for Reading Public Schools. She works in the business office. As you can see from her resume, she has a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from UMass Lowell, Master of Education in Elementary Education from Lesley College. She has also been part of the MASBO program as well.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to our meeting tonight.
Thank you for having me.
If you would like to start with any opening remarks, and then we'll
Sure.
get into the questions.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as you know, my name is Martha. I've worked here in Reading for a little under the last 2.5 years under the direction of Mary DeLye. As you can tell from my resume, I spent almost 20 years in media, so I am a career changer. I joined MASBO in September of 2011 and participated in a licensure program. Completed that in May of 2012 and applied for my initial license, which has been granted by the DESE. I'm 2/3 of the way done on my MCPPO designation. I've completed contracting overview and supplies and services, and my plan is to take the design and construction course in the fall and then apply for MCPPO designation. I'm very excited to be here interviewing tonight, and hopefully I'll answer all your questions successfully. So,
Sure.
Just ask,
Absolutely.
what is MCPPO?
it's a procurement. So understanding Chapter 30B and the laws and regulations that go along with procurement, whether it's goods and services, so it's procurement.
Sorry.
It's through the Inspector General's office.
Great. Mrs. Doxer, would you like to start us off again?
Sure. So I think you've been a part of the budget thesis
Yes.
building. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. I'm interested in, I see that you have the early childhood background. So I'm interested in how you integrate your early childhood education and the budget and what that process has been like.
Sure. Well, the budget process here is very participatory, and certainly we want input from everyone in the community, whether it's in the school community or the community at large. And it's very different building a budget for a school versus a business, where you really are held to your budgets in the school and municipalities, whereas in businesses, oftentimes you're not. You're beholden to whether revenues are coming in or not. So it's been a very different process. I have participated very much so in the last 2 years, more so this past year under the direction of Mary in terms of the nuts and bolts and developing the budget. My master's is in elementary education, and I actually did my student teaching here in Reading at the Killam. I think it gives me a different perspective, a little bit of an understanding of what the resources the teachers need. At the end of the day, the budget is to support the student growth and student development. So I know there's a wonderful practice already in place here to meet with each building and understand what their needs are and what their wants are for a budget in terms of a budget document, what to include. I'm not sure that I've answered all your question. Was there a second part to it?
I probably didn't ask it clearly because you've already been through the process, but I guess that was my question, and then added on to that, the budget process goes out to each of the schools, as you said, and finds out what their needs. How do you see your job integrating that educational piece as it goes along, and not just in the budget process, but so that you keep sort of involved in both the numbers and the understanding of the education?
Well, I think
Educational
you have
needs.
to tie the budget document to what the goals are for the district, whether it's the individual school goal, their district-determined measure, and how you would tie the money that you're going to spend on student achievement. So whether it's a need for additional paras or additional classrooms, additional classroom teachers. So making all those connections to supporting the students and what actually ends up in the budget. So it's a very long process. I didn't realize how long the budget process is. It begins very early, and as I said, it's very inclusive with a number of meetings, whether it be with the administrator, the district leadership team, so getting input from everybody. And at the end of the day, working with the superintendent to create a narrative that tells the story of what and why we're spending the money, or we're asking for the money that we're asking for. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you talk about what got you from media to here?
Sure. I spent time with the Chicago Tribune and then a number of other newspapers, and as Craigslist continued to develop, their income and their revenue continued to decline, and circulation continued to decline as people consume their information in much different ways versus, I still love picking up a newspaper and ink on paper, but so many people consume their technology, their news on their, iPhones and their tablets and whatnot. So, media was shrinking, the revenues were shrinking, and I always thought that I would go and teach. When I finished my master's at Lesley, my plan was to go and teach, but there was a wonderful opportunity at CNET that I just couldn't say no to, and I spent the next 7 years flying back and forth between here and New York, which was a fabulous opportunity for me. When I went back, I did teach a maternity leave in Lawrence Public Schools, and I just realized that the challenges, it had been too long since I had finished my master's and gotten into a classroom, and the challenges that teachers face now, to be a great teacher was going to take more time than I thought I had. So I combined my love of finance and my interest in education. So it was a perfect marriage for me.
Thank you.
Ms. Borowski?
Hi, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Where you already have relationships here, this question is actually fairly specific. I'd like to ask what kind of a manager of people you would be, and specifically, you've got the nutrition department, this position has facilities. So what kind of a manager will you be, and how will you develop those relationships?
I think that I've taken great care over the last 2.5 years to develop relationships across the district, whether it's with someone that I would now supervise, whether it's food services or facilities. I take great pride in being approachable and being a resource to people. In terms of my management style, I'm not a micromanager by any sense of the word. I trust people to be professional and to understand what their needs and their goals are and to prioritize appropriately. I think in terms of being a manager for Safe Food Services, it would be an advocate for her in terms of what she may need or goals that she might have for her department and for her program. And same thing for facilities. At the end of the day, we want our schools to be safe for all of our students, and that's probably the number one priority for a facilities director. So being an advocate and being a resource for them and helping them understand their budgets and helping them develop a new budget if they have needs or wants, so going forward.
Thank you.
Mrs. Webb?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Part of the question has already been answered in terms of, why media even after your master's, but then it looks like you spent another 6 years or so still in media and only recently moved into education. So I guess I still have some sort of questions on that. I'm just trying to understand the transition that you were talking about. When were you part-time? You said you taught part-time?
When I left the Eagle Tribune, I didn't put it on my resume
Okay.
because it was only an 8-week period.
Oh, I thought it was when you left CNET.
No. When I left CNET to take the position at the Eagle Tribune, which was literally 3 miles from my home. And so it was a great way for me to transition from being based in New York to back in the region. So that was the transition from one media company to another.
Okay, it's just there, a lot of different, and maybe that's the way it is in media. And I know that we're not in the days for most people, except people who've been in the district for 30 years, of people staying at one place for 10, 15, 30 years. But
Well, some of my transition was within the company. So I worked for CBS in Atlanta, which was part of Tribune Company. So my move from CBS to Chicago was just moved to another business division within Tribune Company.
Okay.
And then I left Tribune Company to come home and work on my master's, and that's when I went to CNET. And the transition from CNET to SX2 Media, CNET sold my division. So I'm, the acquiring equity investors made me a deal to stay on for at least a year, which I accepted, and
Okay. I see. It's a little, I was trying to follow it. I really was working at it.
no, that's okay. It's my family has trouble. Where were you? When
Yeah.
you- So I
So-
certainly have moved around.
Right. Clearly you just talked about some aspects of your current role interfacing with people in the district. I personally have not met you before, so I was going to say in your current role, which is somewhat more behind the scenes, thinking of Mary DeLai has been, the public face here with us, town meeting, working with the town staff, municipal staff. So my question is, how do you see yourself in that more public role and the requirements of really this director job and that public piece of it?
I'm very comfortable speaking in public and making presentations. I actually am very active in MASBO and just gave a presentation at their annual institute in May down at Ocean's Edge on policy and procurement. Policy and Procedures Manual and why every district needs one. So I'm very comfortable publicly speaking. I actually lived here in the district for almost 7 years on Woburn Street. So I'm familiar with the town. I'm familiar with where the schools are. I do make an effort to go out to the schools to sit with the building secretaries, provide one-on-one guidance for them when they have questions. I bring my kids to plays here at the high school, my nieces and nephews to plays, and the fall days down, although I didn't get to dunk John, he wasn't in the dunk tank when I went by the last time. So I certainly am open to being active in the district and look forward to that opportunity. I do field questions from parents when the phone rings here. Occasionally, it ends up in my office, and certainly I have no problem interacting with whether it's the school committee or anyone else.
I actually have a question. I've been
Sure.
fairly quiet this evening, but it's striking compared with other candidates that we've spoken with that your experience level isn't quite as long as some of those other candidates. What are you most concerned about? What areas concern you most about taking this position?
I wouldn't necessarily qualify it as a concern, but Certainly, I don't have the length and breadth and depth of experience as some of the other people who you've spoken to, but I certainly have a strong accounting and finance and budgeting and an analytical background. And those skill sets, I think, transition nicely to a school system. There are a number of resources out there available to me, whether it's attending the annual DESE end-of-year report summit that they have every year to kind of go over the DESE end-of-year report, which I have successfully completed for the district the last 2 years in a row. MASBO has bi-monthly meetings that I attend for professional development. In addition to getting the MCPPO designation, I took 2 courses this year through the Inspector General's office. One was Building a School, which was procurement focused just on schools, whether it was transportation, procurement, foods. There was a lot of food service procurement that was discussed that day. I also attended a course on building a procurement office and have worked with Darlene Porter in facilities and Paula Santarpio here in the central office to develop checklists. So anyone in the district who needs to go out and buy something can look through these checklists and say, okay, well, what laws do I need to follow? If it's less than 10,000, then it's sound business practices. If it's 10,000 to 24,000, I need to get 3 quotes. So making that information in those templates readily available to everyone in the district. So certainly, there's a lot more for me to learn. I've learned a lot in 2.5 years, but the resources are out there and available to me to tap into, whether it's my mentor from MASBO, who was the Assistant Director of Finance in Weston. Mary's only going to be down the street, so certainly I hope she'll still answer my phone calls. But I think that those resources are there and available for me, and certainly I have a background in managing people, so I do think that I could be successful in this role, absolutely.
Okay. I'll try for yet another, hopefully not inappropriate question, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
In 5 years, hopefully still here and maybe the assistant superintendent of finance. And in 10 years, I don't know, that's too far down the road.
Perfect answer. That's fine. Thank you. Mrs. Zabrowski.
Thank you. I have a question. You would come at this position from such a unique point of view, being within the district already. So I'd like to know if you could identify one thing that is currently happening in the business area of our school district that you really wouldn't want to change, that you think we do exemplary and you would just, it's the thing you most want to keep the same. And then conversely, is there anything that we're doing that you're kind of excited at the opportunity to change a little bit or to improve?
Sure. I think that I don't want to just maintain, the status quo. I think that there are opportunities to innovate, whether it's through professional development of our support staff in the buildings. There are a number of policies and procedures in place right now that I certainly wouldn't change, that the policies that the school committee sets are supported by procedures that we implement on a day-to-day basis, whether it's as minute as a budget transfer has to be approved by a department head and there's a form for it, or more, they have to make a deposit once a week. So those policies that the school committee and the town set are supported by procedures that are in place. So certainly I wouldn't do anything to undo any of that. As far as the second half of your question, what would I do to, or what away, where?
Is there any area, from your vantage point now of working under Mary DeLye, is there any area that you look at and say, if I had the opportunity, I would change this or improve this?
I don't know that there's something that I would change. I certainly have recognized that there's a need for more professional development with some of the support staff. And even, there was a transition of our student services account from Carrie Borsini when she left the office to me for an interim, and then to Laura DeBacco. And Laura's done a great job with it, and we both have recognized over the last few months that we really need to set out a training for our advisors come the fall so that we can get everyone on the same page in terms of what's allowable for student activity, what's a purchase that's acceptable, what's not acceptable under the law, and really educate them on the process when they should be handing over monies for a deposit, how to request a check, so things like that. So I think there are opportunities more for that in the district right now than anything else, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah. I think Mr. Caruso touched on a little bit, just trying to get a better sense. So right now, there's a new high school principal coming in the fall. There's a new director of student services. there's a
Director of
new
Facilities.
director of facilities, a HR person that's out on maternity leave, and
There's a new IT director, too.
yeah.
Right.
And so, Dr. Doherty's gonna be up to here with all of that, trying to manage all of that, so he's not gonna have the time to, I know this is coming out the wrong way, get someone up to speed, and so are you comfortable, jumping in and keeping the ship going the way it's going, I guess?
Absolutely. That's one of my concerns for the district, is that there is a lot of turnover at some very senior district leadership positions. And so Lou Caputo and I, the new IT director, we're meeting later on this week to go to review in detail his FY15 budget. So he has an understanding of what's in his budget for next year, and that will help lay the foundation for his FY16 budget requests. And I think that's one of the ways that this position can help support those new people coming in, whether it's the new high school principal or the new director of student services. I met on a monthly basis with the director of student services to review spending, where you were at, what were you forecasting, in terms of unanticipated out-of-district placements. So I think this role is important to their continued success and Dr. Doherty's, and then the district as a whole. So certainly knowing a lot of the administrators already in the district and having a good working relationship with them, and fostering good relationships with the incoming directors will help all of us be successful, quite frankly.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So one of the things that might be coming up is the working group grappling with the space issues.
Yes.
And that might or might not culminate into a building project. And I'm wondering what experience you have with, I know that you're taking these workshops, and they all sound great to prepare you for this. What experience do you have?
Well, one of the things, if there is if obviously there's a need for an early childhood center that, clearly we have a desire for full-day kindergarten in the district. We have more than 70% participation coming up for next year. So certainly there's a need. If the town does move forward with one of the options available, there's an owner's project manager that comes in that really oversees a lot of the day-to-day operations. So certainly I would tap into the resources that are at MSBA and work appropriately with facilities. I think facilities would have a large role in this project as well.
Mrs. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso. Just a question about, especially since you're already in Reading, been here for the last 2.5 years, understand that, we have a revenue issue. We talk about revenues all the time. And the dialogue, past town meeting, addressed sort of the view of operational budget, basically sort of hitting a wall, and also capital. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to how you see your role with interacting with folks on the municipal side, and what kind of leadership and input you feel like you would have in those dialogues.
Certainly, I have a very good working relationship with Sharon Engstrom, the town accountant, and Nancy Heffernan, the town treasurer. I've worked very closely with them over the last 2.5 years on various projects. I have not had haven't had an opportunity to work with the new town manager. Certainly, a lot of our budget, obviously our budget is dictated by the town manager in terms of the percentage that they give to us from the revenue stream for the town. Looking for other opportunities for funding, whether it's other grants that may be available to fund different initiatives, or figuring out how to leverage some of our revolving funds would be another creative way to try and tackle any revenue shortfalls that we may have. Certainly, we have a number of revolving funds, whether it's the RISE or the kindergarten, full-day kindergarten tuition that we take in. So there are opportunities there as well.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Further questions? Well, thank you very much. Closing remarks, anything that you might want to?
Well, I mean, I guess I think I kind of can surmise from some of your questions, but what do you see as the biggest challenge for this incoming position, this incoming person?
We're not used to taking questions like that, but.
Oh, okay.
We'll
I
give it a
wasn't
shot.
allowed to ask questions, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's been said too many times, but Mary is leaving a hole in the district. We've come to rely on her. We have had an excellent working relationship with her. The concern is that someone can come in, hit the ground running, and not miss a beat with where Mary had left us. I think, speaking personally, that's certainly one of my concerns. And also, I think Ms. Doxer said it well earlier, there's a lot that goes into this job. It's amazing the
Yeah.
breadth of areas that this job is responsible for. And being able to find somebody that really can handle that breadth of duty is concerning. So those are my concerns. I don't know if the committee wants to share their own.
I mean, I concur.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I completely concur, but would just add, I really feel like it's an innovation. Mary has been extremely innovative over the years in her role. That's how she became assistant superintendent. I mean, she innovated in all areas, whether it was not just our schools, but the energy work that she did was amazing. So, yeah, that maybe we're there on that. We need to sort of keep that going. But what's the next space to be innovative in? And so I'm looking for a person who has that ability and richness and, is gonna kind of come in and create that next area of sort of innovation. And that's how the district is from an educational perspective, and, needs to be a leadership perspective in terms of the school finance, so.
Listen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in late, staying late.
That's okay.
So we
Thank you very
appreciate
much
it.
for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank
Certainly.
you.
Stretch that, work that out, and back down.
Does she live in Reading?
No, from the interview, I took it that she lives in North Andover.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Okay. So, if I might, maybe I should have started with this before we started meeting with the three candidates this evening, but it's an interesting fact that this is one of two positions that the school committee is responsible for. We're responsible for hiring the superintendent of schools, and we're also responsible for fulfilling this position, the director of finance and operations. So it's a unique opportunity for the board to hire Ms. Delai's replacement. I wanted to make sure that the community understood that. Our next steps, if I might suggest, if there are questions, follow-up questions that we might like to ask of the candidates, I know that Dr. Doherty's next step is to be meeting with the candidates individually over the next few days. The school committee is scheduled to meet Thursday morning at 7:30 for a final discussion and hopefully a vote on a candidate. So I would suggest that if there are follow-up questions that we want, now would be an appropriate time to ask Dr. Doherty to follow up with that. If you don't have any questions now, but they come to you on the drive home, you can send Dr. Doherty an email, and he can take care of that. Mr. Robinson?
If I can, I
Absolutely.
think if it's not appropriate, stop me, but I just be curious, Ms. Borowski, with how the search committee went and to arrive at these, or any questions that came up with these particular candidates that didn't come out tonight.
Sure. So we signed a confidentiality agreement, so I'm going to be really careful how I answer
No
that
names,
question.
yeah.
No. I will say that I felt really good about the process. I think that it was very thorough. I think that I feel very good that these were the three selected candidates. I personally feel like these were the three with the highest level of quality answers, and I feel good about that, if that's the question you're asking.
Or that, and were there any questions was any information that came out in those interviews that we didn't get out here tonight?
No, I don't think so. And I really don't think so, actually. This felt very consistent to me. This felt very consistent to me with how they felt in the first phase of interviews.
I guess one of the questions I'd like to ask Dr. Doherty to follow up on is, when you check with references, to ask how these candidates are under fire. Because I think more times than I care to think about, there's heat in the discussion. This town has very involved people, which is a blessing. But I think sometimes people want answers right away, and sometimes answers aren't available right away. There needs to be research done, and so I'd like to know how they respond under fire, to cool down the situation and keep it positive.
Excellent. Mrs. Webb?
So along those lines about references, I have a question, a sort of process. We can read the letters of reference that were in here, and, there's some, we can interpret that information, but with the exception of one letter, or two letters of recommendation for one of the candidates, we know those persons who wrote the recommendation. So we don't have any way to, the other people who wrote the recommendations, we know that person might be the superintendent of schools for a particular district, but I don't have any way to sort of value other than just what I'm reading on the paper. So I'm just looking for
So I call,
those references.
yes.
So
I've started doing
Okay.
that.
Okay.
To get them here tonight, I had to check references to make sure that what we heard on
Yes.
Thursday was, in line what was true, so.
Okay, and I guess I'm trying to get a sense of value of that, and I think I'm trying to ask, do you have a way to make sort of a value judgment on the worthiness of the person who's signing the recommendation? And
There are certain questions you can ask in certain ways that get you the answers that you want, or you're looking for.
Right, and
Yeah.
so those dialogues are dialogues that you've had some of and will follow up
Yes,
more?
yes.
Okay.
I've had conversations with references of each of the three candidates, and I will continue to do that.
Okay. So I think there's, just to continue that and dig in, and then we'll get some feedback from you on Thursday?
Yes.
When we meet Thursday morning.
If I could ask a clarifying question, and I don't actually have an intention to do this, but there's no reason why we can't call those references?
No, you can.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure the committee knew that.
Yep.
Moving in, so, thank you.
So I also,
Absolutely, go
sorry.
ahead. No, I was looking right at you.
I also have a question, and it might be putting the cart before the horse, but I'm just wondering about, with one of these candidates, if we were to choose her, that would leave another opening in our administrative office. And I'm wondering, we have qualified candidates. Just where my head is going, is,
So, can I speak in global terms and not
Yes.
necessarily specific to this position? There are many times in our recent history where there's been promotions from within that create other vacancies that we have to fill. And that's just the reality of the situation. You also have to keep in mind that there are other similar positions open right now in other school districts that all three I know are,
that was another question.
so.
I'm struggling with some of the confidentiality in what we read.
No,
and
I'm
what
talking
can be
about in
asked.
general terms, usually when people are looking for different communities, like communities, and if there are positions available, then they are applying to those communities as well. And that, my guess is, out of these three candidates, that is the case.
So so we could have a vacancy in a current position. Anyone could be looking right now. We don't know that.
That's correct.
So, I mean, whether,
Yeah.
we have no control.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we
I
don't.
think from a But from a professional viewpoint, we should never, I'll say, I would never want my boss to not recommend me for a promotion because he's, can't figure out how to solve the problem of the gap I leave behind. So I think that, that's not, and I don't think any of us would ever make a decision in that regard. We just need to make a decision in regard to who's the very best candidate, right, for this position. And
Mrs. Doxer?
Sorry, I just need to clarify because that was not what I was meaning to say at all.
Well,
I'm saying more that we have very qualified candidates, and if we should have someone that opens up another spot, might there be the potential within this group of candidates also to fill the other spot, I guess?
My guess is no, because the
There are-
current positions that the other candidates are in are higher than that
that
position.
position, right.
Thank you.
Not that I've hired hundreds of people in my life, but I've hired dozens. I don't think it's never worked out, and I don't think it actually worked out in this district when we followed that practice, so I wouldn't be a fan of that regardless. Were there other questions?
I have a
Absolutely.
couple. So, John, when you call references, do you ever get bad ones? I mean, does that?
I actually do, yes.
Uh,
Well, when you check references, there are the references that are listed,
Yeah.
but now that candidates are public, you can check other references as well of people that you may know through, my superintendent's association, or Craig could do the same, and, you can have conversations with other people that have worked with candidates.
So, I guess maybe this is for you. How do we envision Thursday go? I mean, can we speak freely, or, I don't want to embarrass anybody, or
Ourselves.
I mean, you really,
or hurt somebody's feelings, or,
yeah,
I mean,
you
how do
want,
you?
it'll be, public, so you
Yeah,
want to.
I guess that's what my question was, is
Yeah,
public.
it's not executive session.
I mean, I like to think about, that's why I like the idea that we're not voting tonight,
Yes.
because
Right.
I like time to think about it.
Definitely.
But, I've been through enough of these, with it be principals or director of student serve, or even superintendents. I mean,
Right.
and usually there's somebody that kind of rises to the top, and, these were all, good people, and, but nobody blew me away, and I'm concerned about that, because I don't know what the time process is. What if we just said we didn't want any one of these candidates? What do we do next?
Well, either way, Mr. Lai is gone on June 30th. So.
No, I know, yeah. Right.
We could reopen the position.
We'd be really late.
You would have a vacancy, a void. I'm not sure at this point how we would
Yeah,
make
I don't
up that
mean that,
void.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything.
No.
I just,
We would have to go through the process again. So we would have to, I would assume we could use the same screening committee and go through that process again. We'd have to talk about, do you want to change the title? Do you want to change the pay scale? I mean, those things
Yeah.
can be done if the committee feels that there is not a viable candidate in the three finalists.
I guess maybe I'm sorry.
But I do have to caution the committee that, we're going to close out the fiscal year. The end of the year report is going to have to be done by somebody. There are tasks that still need to happen. And those, we've got to have to figure out who's going to do those tasks.
Right, but I don't want to, and I'm not saying I don't want, my initial reaction, but the last thing I want to do, is ever just get a warm body because we need someone to do the reports or whatever. People leave or go out on maternity or get sick or whatever, and other people in the department have to chip in to get things done until we can get the right person.
No, agreed. But one of the things that we said to the screening committee, and Ms. Borowski can attest to this, is that if they did not feel comfortable moving candidates forward, that they could envision would be the next Director of Finance and Operations, they should not move them forward. Screening committee did not push people forward for the sake of pushing people forward.
Yeah, and that's why I said I'm not trying to be
Right.
disrespectful. I just, yeah, maybe, as I said, I got to think about it. Maybe it was just tonight, I don't know.
Mrs. Doxer? Sorry.
I guess I actually didn't share the feeling that Mr. Robinson is expressing, and my thinking was more in that, that jobs, that the roles people are playing will have to pay careful attention to balancing the weaknesses and the strengths in order to build the team that's going to work together going forward. So thinking about who we want to hire would also entail balancing that, and making sure that the skills are there in that administrative team.
Mrs. Webb?
So I just want to say, I think it's whatever additional information that you can gather in the next day or so, and to be able to report back to us on Thursday in terms of, you know, there are some very good things on some of these resumes and some of the letters. And, you know, there's at least one candidate that does have a real breadth of experience. And so I think the thing is wanting to make sure to validate, you know, we need to make sure that that's validated. And, you know, this process, we do the best that we can. The screening committee, all of us here, you know, you're, you know, and if we're going to make a decision, perhaps on a candidate that we're going to hire, and, you know, it's to the extent that you can try to get information that really more truly predicts their actual performance when their feet hit the ground here. You know, I know I'm preaching to the choir in terms of that question, but so I don't have anything specific other than just trying to validate, you know, and some of the information that's here.
Yeah, and, you know, I have to say, I've talked to references already that have validated what you see there.
Okay.
Again, I would have felt very uncomfortable moving someone forward to be interviewed in public and risk their position in another district if I didn't feel that they were worthy to come forward. And I said that to the screening committee as well, and I've done that in the past, where after reference checks, people that the screening committee have moved forward, the reference checks didn't check out, and they did not become finalists. So,
Can I just?
You can finish that point, certainly.
So, I think, that, you know, the challenge is, you know, some people, when you go for a new position, you know, some is it a promotion, sometimes you move to lateral positions for purposes of relocating or whatever, you want, you know, people have all kinds of reasons for taking lateral positions. And so in terms of like predicting performance, that's not as much of an issue because it's a lateral position. So in this case, all three of these candidates are basically promotional, you know, step up. And some of it is, you know, we would have to, based on this information, judge, you know, well, how big is that step? And so the key is trying to understand the skills that each candidate needs for the step, right? And say, how comfortable do we feel with the information that we have on paper, and in, you know, to say that they're going to be able to execute in that step. And, you know, that's our challenge. You're saying that, you know, you've validated some of this information already.
and I'll make some additional phone calls, and Mr. Martin and I are going to meet with each of the three candidates as well.
Okay.
Mrs. Borowski?
Tomorrow, I believe, we're meeting with all three tomorrow.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that the screening committee actually asked for that, as well as you're offering to do it, that we specifically said, to your exact concern, there's what you see on the paper, there's what you hear in the interview, but very specifically asked the superintendent in vetting those references, if you hear or see anything that is concerning enough, don't move someone forward. So that was actually very explicitly discussed. And I just guess I would share that what I'm struggling with is we have three very different candidates, very
Yeah.
different, and it really does get to the vision of what the priority is. Do we need someone with that deep experience, or do we need someone who can bring some cultural continuity and who knows Reading? So, or someone with a completely fresh perspective. But a clear desire to do this work. So I think that's sort of how I'm thinking of it, is less these three candidates as what each of them brings some strengths and weaknesses, and what's the right fit for Reading right now. is kind of where I'm thinking it through.
Mrs. Doxer?
I think I also have to keep reminding myself, as the candidate said, there are very big shoes to fill Mary's position, but we are not going to have another Mary. We might have someone ultimately as wonderful as Mary, but she will not be Mary. She has to be who she's going to be and take this job and make it into her job with the team. And it's not even the same title as what Mary grew into in her 10 years with, 10, 12? 10 years with the district. So we have to be careful not to compare apples and oranges, although we need someone like Mary, but we need someone that can take it and do the job in her way and work with others in making it work.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess my concern, and I think I said it to Martha, was there's not a lot of on-the-job training here because we don't have the people to, I mean, we're going to be mentoring a new high school principal, a new director. So that was my concern. We need somebody, not to necessarily be Mary, but somebody that can come right in and keep this thing going.
How's the background?
With the background. I guess that's what I was trying to say.
So I'm very glad that we set this up so that we can think about it. That was, I know, I
That was
think
all Mr.
Mr. Robinson had really said that. And I really appreciate all of the committee members for the very unique scheduling we have. I appreciate it.
That's fine. I don't believe that we have further business to discuss this evening. I'm not aware of donations or minutes or
Nope.
anything. Again, the committee is going to reconvene at 7:30 a.m. on Thursday morning back here. Again, if you have questions, please forward them to Dr. Doherty. And if I could have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? And the committee is adjourned.